The boy who fell from the stars. The night was cold and silent. The trees in the forest stood still, the sky was clear, and the stars were shining like tiny fires in the dark. John was walking alone near the woods, holding a small flashlight. His dog Max was walking beside him. They were returning home after checking the fence near the farm. Suddenly, a loud sound broke the silence, something like thunder, but not from the clouds. John looked up and saw a light falling from the sky. It was not a plane, it was glowing blue. Fast and strange, the object crashed deep into the forest. Trees shook, birds flew away, and the earth made a soft rumble. Max barked and pulled John toward the noise. John's heart was beating fast. He had never seen anything like this before. He walked slowly, step by step, pushing the bushes aside, holding the flashlight tight. The light now showed a deep hole in the ground, steam rising and smoke in the air. In the center of the crash was a small pod, silver and smooth, half open like a broken egg. The lights on it were blinking red and blue. John moved closer, his eyes wide. Max growled a little but stayed behind him. Inside the pod was a small figure, curled up, shaking, and covered in a thin metal cloth. It was not a baby, but it was not fully grown. Maybe the size of a 10-year-old child. Its skin was light purple, eyes big and glowing faint green. It looked scared, weak, and confused. John raised his hands and said, "It's okay, I'm not here to hurt you," his voice soft and slow. He didn't know if the creature could understand, but he wanted to show peace. The small alien looked at him, then slowly spoke. The voice was strange but clear. "Please help me. My mom is kidnapped. They took her. She is forced to work for them. I escaped, but they are coming for me." John stood still, shocked. He did not expect this. Not only could the creature talk, but it spoke perfect English. The boy stood up with shaky legs, one arm holding his chest like it hurt, his eyes full of fear. John didn't ask many questions. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around the alien boy. He looked around and said, "We can't stay here. Someone will come. Maybe others like you or worse." They both started walking back to John's truck. Max kept looking back at the crash, his ears high, his nose sniffing the air. Something didn't feel right. Even the air was different now in the truck. The boy sat quietly, his hands on his lap, eyes staring at the stars through the window. John looked at him and said, "What is your name?" The boy said, "My name is Kale. I come from a world far from here. We call it Nevria, but my people were attacked by slavers. They take the weak, they control our minds. They want to use our powers," John said. "Powers?" And Kale nodded slowly. He touched the window and a small glow appeared, like a soft wave of light moving through the glass. John had no words, only more questions. Kale said, "They are looking for me, not because of me, but because of what I carry. My mind holds a path, a secret path to a place they can't find without me. My mother hid it in me before they took her." John said, "Why are you telling me this?" And Kale looked at him with sad eyes. "Because I had no one else. And you came when I fell, I think. You are good." John didn't know what to say, but something inside him felt heavy, like a voice telling him this moment was not by chance. It was a call, maybe from fate or something bigger. As they reached home, John took Kale inside, gave him warm clothes and food. The boy was quiet, tired, but his eyes kept looking at the door, like he expected it to break open later that night. While John tried to sleep, Kale stood near the window, whispering something in a strange language. The stars above seemed to blink faster, like they were alive and listening. Suddenly, Max began barking wildly, looking outside and growling deep. John ran to the door and looked out into the darkness, his eyes searching for danger. Kale turned to him and said, "They found me." The forest outside made a strange sound, not wind, not animal, but something else, something cold and sharp in the air. John's heart sank. He stepped forward and said only one word, "Run." A map in his mind. Morning was strange and quiet. The sky was dull and gray, as if the sun itself was afraid to shine too bright on that day. The wind moved slowly across the trees, carrying a feeling of warning something was coming, and it was not. Friendly John had not slept the whole night. His mind was full of questions. His heart was heavy with fear and wonder. Cale, the alien boy, sat on the old wooden chair, wrapped in a blanket, his eyes staring at nothing, his body calm, but his mind clearly busy. Had barely spoken since they escaped the crash site, except for one line that kept echoing in John's ears. They found me. John made tea with shaking hands. He placed a cup in front of Cale and said softly, "You need to tell me everything." Cale looked up slowly, his glowing green eyes tired and distant, and then he whispered something that made John sit down fast. "There is a map inside my mind, not drawn, not written. It is alive, it moves and hides. It protects the way to the prison where my mother is held. It was placed in me by a machine that only works once and never again." John asked, "How can a map be alive?" And Cale touched his temple with 2 fingers and said, "Because it is made of light and memory and fear. When I am afraid, the path shifts. When I am calm, it becomes clear." John sat back stunned, trying to understand. Cale closed his eyes and breathed deeply. His skin began to glow, just a little, not bright, but soft and pulsing like a heart made of stars. Slowly an image began to above his head. A cluster of stars spinning slowly in a strange shape. John gasped. The floating shape looked like a galaxy, but not one he had ever seen before. It twisted like a spiral, and inside it was a line, a glowing path with sharp turns and bright points like hidden doors. Cale opened his eyes, and the image vanished like smoke. He said, "I only see this when I feel safe, and right now I don't feel safe for long." John said, "What do we do now?" And Cale replied, "We must leave soon, because they are not just looking for me, they are tracking the map itself. Even if I stay silent, the light in my mind calls to them like a signal in the dark." Suddenly the lights in the house flickered, the air felt heavy, and a low hum began to rise from outside like a machine waking up. John grabbed his rifle, not that it would help against anything from space, but it was the only thing he trusted. Cale stood up and pointed to the sky and said, "They are here, but not close yet. They send hunters first, and watchers, invisible machines that smell memory and taste fear." John said, "Then we move now, but where do we go?" And Cale walked to the map on the wall, the old one John kept for decoration, and Cale placed his hand over a spot near the ocean and said, "There under the hill is an old gate. One my people left behind long ago. It may still work if we fix it." John asked, "How do you know this?" And Cale answered, "The map is not only a path, it also speaks. It tells me secrets from those who made it, voices of my kind from far away with waiting." John packed food, water, clothes, and tools. Cale carried nothing but the memory in his mind and the fear in his heart. Max the dog followed them closely, growling low at the empty road as they drove away from the farmhouse. Sky darkened again, clouds moving fast like being pushed by unseen hands. Cale sat still in the truck, his eyes closed, his mind swimming through space, through memories that were not all his. He whispered to himself, counting numbers not in English but in the language of stars. The numbers were coordinates, places that did not exist on any human map. Suddenly, Cale opened his eyes and shouted, "Turn left." John turned hard, the tires screeched, and they missed a black figure standing in the middle of the road, tall, thin, and motionless, with glowing red eyes and a face that had no mouth. John looked in the mirror, but the figure was gone. Cale said, "That was a shadow scout. It sees not with eyes, but with heat and fear. If it marks us, others will come fast and many." They drove through the night, no music, no words, only silence broken by the wemba sound of wheels on gravel and Max's low breathing. Cale leaned against the window, watching stars fall and rise, like he was trying to talk to them without words. Finally, they reached the edge of a hill above the sea, and Cale pointed to a cave hidden by trees. They walked inside and found a strange circle carved into the stone floor, covered in dust and vines, symbols glowing faint under the dirt. Cale said, "This is it, the old gate. It needs energy to wake, and I must give it some of mine, but only enough or I will fade." John looked at the strange lines and asked, "Are you sure?" And Cale nodded slowly, placed his hand on the center of the circle, and began to hum a note deep and pure that echoed in the stone like the cave was singing back. The ground began to glow. The circle lit up like fireflies in the dark, and the air turned warm. The map in Kale's mind began to shine again, showing the next step, a new path. But outside in the forest, unseen eyes opened, and dark shapes began to move silently toward them, and Kale whispered, "They are closer now." Chase through the shadows. The air inside the cave was warm, but shaking like the earth itself was holding its breath. The glowing circle on the ground faded slowly, and Kale fell back into John's arms, his face pale, his skin dim, his energy almost gone. John pulled him close and said, "Stay with me," Kale whispered. "I opened the gate, but not fully. It needs time and protection. If they reach it before us, they will break it forever outside." The sky turned deep purple, a strange color that did not belong to Earth. The wind moved in reverse for a second, pulling leaves upward and making the trees whisper in fear. Max growled low, his ears sharp, his body tense. Something was near, something not alive, but still hunting. Suddenly the cave lit up again, not from the gate, but from the entrance behind them. A beam of cold white light shined in like a blade, slicing the shadows. A shape stepped into the light, tall, thin, and covered in black metal armor. No face, no voice, only breathing, like a machine remembering war. John raised his rifle, knowing it would do nothing, but still feeling safer with it. Kale looked at the figure and said softly, "That is a tracker, one of the few that can smell memory and follow fear. It was made from dead soldiers and machines. It has no soul." The tracker stepped forward, the ground under it cracking softly with each step. Its hands, shaped like claws but glowing with energy, it raised one arm and fired a pulse of blue fire toward. Then John grabbed Kale and rolled behind a stone wall. The blast hit the floor near them, sending sparks and smoke into the air. Max barked and charged at the figure, but was thrown back by an invisible force, hitting the wall hard. But still alive, Kale held his head and said, "The gate must be protected or everything will be lost." John nodded and looked around for anything he could use. The cave was old but deep and filled with strange objects. Buried under dust, he grabbed a metal rod shaped like a staff, its surface covered in alien marks. When he touched it, the rod glowed faintly like it remembered being used in battle. John stepped out holding the rod high. The tracker turned to him, slowly calculating threat level, its red eyes narrowing. John yelled, "Go now, Kale, find the zeal. Next mark, I will hold it here." Kale hesitated, his eyes full of pain and trust. Then he ran deeper into the cave, searching for the next piece of the gate, puzzle his steps echoing like whispers of hope. John swung the rod, and to his surprise it created a wave of light, a shield blocking the next fire blast. The tracker paused, then rushed forward with speed faster than thought, claws aiming for John's heart. The rod responded again. A burst of energy sent the tracker flying back into the cave wall, breaking stone and sending dust everywhere. John stood shaking, not sure how he did it, not sure how long he could keep doing it. Kale reached a second chamber inside the cave where old machines were still glowing with soft light. He placed his hand on the panel and the wall opened, revealing another part of the map glowing inside a crystal. The map pulsed once, then burned its shape into Kale's memory, updating the path ahead. The gate responded and began to hum louder, calling for activation back. Near the entrance, the tracker stood again, damaged but not defeated. It screamed without sound, a signal rising into the sky, unseen by humans, but clear across the stars. John saw this and shouted, "Kale, we have to leave now. They know we are here. More are coming." Kale ran back, holding the crystal, the map now burning behind his eyes. Together they moved through a tunnel at the back of the cave, Max limping behind them, the light fading as they went deeper into the earth, hoping the tunnel led to safety. But behind them, more shadows began to crawl down the walls, metal hands and red eyes filling the entrance like spiders without mercy. Kale said, "We cannot run forever. They will keep coming until I am taken, or the gate is complete." John looked at him and said, "Then we finish the gate fast, and we make sure they never find Earth again." As they reached the end of the tunnel, a large metal door blocked their way. Kale pressed the crystal into the center, and the door opened slowly, revealing a secret chamber filled with old star maps floating in the air. In the middle of the chamber was a seat glowing with soft light, like it was waiting for someone. Cale stepped toward it and said this was made for my kind to activate the core of the gate. I must sit and complete the memory connection. John said, how long will it take? And Cale replied, long enough to be found, and maybe too long to survive, but I must try. He sat in the seat and closed his eyes. The air thickened, the room pulsing with energy. The star maps began to spin around him faster and faster, each one unlocking a new part of the journey. John turned and aimed his weapon at the tunnel, ready for anything. Max stood beside him, silent, but loyal, ready to fight or fall outside. The sky screamed again, and 5 more trackers fell from the clouds, their mission clear, their target locked inside the chamber. Cale whispered, the gate is waking. Forbidden's gate. The ground beneath the chamber shook like thunder was crawling through the bones of the earth. The walls trembled, the glowing maps flickered like candles in the wind, and Cale sat motionless under his hands gripping the sides of the ancient seat. His eyes closed, his breath shallow. John stood near the tunnel, in trance, his heart beating louder than the noise around him, the rifle in his hands, useless against what was coming, but still firm in his grip. Max stayed by his side, growling deep and low, his eyes locked on the shadows that moved like liquid in the dark. From the tunnel came the sound of metal scraping against a stone, cold and sharp, like claws dancing on bone. The trackers were close, their red eyes slicing through the dark, their bodies moving without sound, their hunger not for food, but for the map that lived in Cale's mind. Cale whispered without opening his eyes, the gate is almost ready, but I need more time. The path is long, and the memory is deep. John shouted over the noise, you have to hurry, they are here, they are too many, I can't hold them. Cale did not move, but the room around him did. The walls began to shift, symbols lighting up in circles around the seat. The floor opened in places, revealing coils of silver wires and glowing stones that pulsed with a slow heartbeat. John looked back down the tunnel and saw them, the trackers crawling forward like shadows with bones, their claws scraping the walls, their heads twitching side to side like insects tasting the air. One of them paused, then leaped forward faster than thought, its body spinning through the air like a blade. John raised the rifle, fired a single shot, and the bullet passed through the creature without harm, but it slowed just enough for John to swing the alien rod. The energy cracked through the air and through the tracker back against the wall, sparks flying like fire in the rain. The other trackers hissed without voices, their eyes locked onto Cale. They knew he was near. Their target was not the chamber, not John, not Max, only the boy with the star in his brain. Cale's voice grew louder, not in volume, but in power. The air around him shimmered like heat on glass, and the spinning star maps began to rise, forming a spiral above his head, each point glowing like a star in a cold sky, each map unlocking a door only Cale could see. John stepped forward, swinging the rod again, each strike burning with energy, but each hit leaving him weaker, his arms heavy, his legs shaking, his vision blurring. He knew he could not do this for long. Max barked and leapt at another tracker, biting metal and fur together, his small body thrown aside. But he stood again, bleeding, but alive, always ready, always loyal. Cale opened his eyes, and they were no longer green, they were filled with stars, tiny galaxies spinning inside them. His voice echoed across the chamber, I have found the gate, and the memory is whole. Now I must show it the way. The floor beneath the seat cracked, and a beam of light shot upward into the ceiling. It burned through the rock without heat, carving a path to the sky above. The stars outside responded, blinking faster like they were speaking in code. The gate is calling, said Cale, but it needs a key, and that key is not metal, it is blood and choice and trust. John looked at him, confused and afraid. What does that mean? Cale stood slowly, the seat fading behind him, the maps now burning inside his chest like a sun trapped in glass. It means one of us must stay, and one must carry the map forward, said Cale, and I was never meant to leave. I was only meant to deliver the path. John shook his head. No, there has to be another way. Cale smiled sadly. There isn't, and you know it. I was chosen not to be saved, but to lead. Someone brave enough to save others, and that someone is you. Behind them the chamber wall split open, revealing a second gate, not like the one before, but older, darker, and filled with mist. It looked alive and angry, as if it remembered every soul who walked through it. Cale handed John the crystal that held the map, his fingers shaking not from fear, but from peace. You must go now. Take the map, find the prison, save her, and if you can, destroy the path, so they can never follow. John took the crystal, his hand closing around it, like it was made of fire. He looked into Cale's glowing eyes and said, I will come back for you. I promise. Cale shook his head and said, no, you will not, and that is how it must be. Trackers reached the chamber, their claws striking stone, their eyes burning with hunger. But Cale raised his hand and the room exploded with light, a shield of pure memory surrounding the gate and pushing the shadows back. John stepped into the mist, Max beside him, both fading from sight as the gate swallowed them whole, the world around them bending, breaking, and remaking itself behind them. Cale stood alone, the chamber collapsing, the trackers screaming, and the stars watching in silence, and the gate closed like a mouth that had finally tasted hope. Her chains are not metal. The sky in the new world was not blue or black. It was a soft burning silver with clouds that moved like rivers above the stars. The ground was dry and cracked, like it had not tasted rain in 100 years, and the wind carried the scent of metal and sorrow. John stood still for a moment, holding Max in one hand and the crystal in the other. The gate behind him had vanished like it never existed, leaving only silence and the strange sound of something breathing beneath the earth. The map inside the crystal began to glow, faintly pulling him toward a path carved into the ground, not by hands, but by memory itself. John followed slowly, each step feeling heavier, like the air was watching him, like the world itself was waiting for him to speak. They walked for hours through empty lands where broken machines lay like fallen statues, and towers made of glass and bone reached into the sky without shadow. Max stayed close, sniffing the wind, his ears twitching at every whisper. The silence was alive here and full of eyes. The crystal pulsed again, and John stopped in front of a massive wall covered in symbols that danced when he blinked. A voice spoke, not from outside, but inside his head, and it said, she is inside, but her mind is not her own. Her chains are not metal. Her prison is built from dreams and lies. John stepped through a thin crack in the wall and entered a place that felt like sleep. The light bent sideways and time moved in waves instead of seconds. He walked through a hallway made of glass where reflections showed him memories that were not his, faces of people he never met, places he had never seen, but somehow knew. In the center of the room she sat, silent and still, her hands resting on her knees, her head bowed, her hair floating like it was underwater, her skin pale with soft lines of light moving across it slowly like vines. Her eyes closed as if dreaming. Cale's voice echoed in John's mind, that is her, that is my mother, but she does not know me anymore. The machine erased her love every morning and replaced it with orders and pain. If you wake her too fast, her mind will break. If you wait too long, it will be gone forever. John stepped closer, each footstep stirring the floor like dust floating in slow motion. He knelt before her and whispered, your son is safe. He gave everything so you could be free, and now I need you to remember him. I need you to remember yourself. Her eyes opened slowly, and they were empty, not cruel, not angry, just empty, like a book with all its pages torn out. She looked at him and said, who are you, and why do I feel sadness in your face? John placed the crystal near her hand, and it glowed softly, pulsing in time with her breath. The map inside it began to change, showing a new path, not a road through space, but through memory, a road back into her own mind. He closed his eyes and whispered, Cale, if you can hear me, help her now. Show her something real, something only you could give. And far away beyond stars and fire, a voice answered. Suddenly the crystal shined bright and warm, and from it rose a small light, shaped like Cale, a memory not dead but alive. He walked toward her, touched her hand, and said, Mother, I found you, and I never stopped believing in you. Her breath caught, her eyes widened, and tears formed without sound. Her fingers trembled, and her lips moved slowly. She said, Cale, is it you, or is this another? Like Cale's light smiled, and said, I am gone, but I am here. I am the part of you they could not erase. I am the love that waited in the dark, and now you must wake. Room shook, the glass cracked, The shadows screamed something had felt the change, something that lived in the silence and fed on memory. John looked around and knew they had to move now or lose everything. The woman stood slowly, her legs weak, but her face strong. She took John's hand and said, I remember his voice. I remember his name, and I will not forget again. They ran through the hallway, now breaking apart, the mirrors turning black and the floor shattering beneath them. Max barked ahead, showing the path, and behind them rose a sound like 1,000 voices crying in one. They reached the outer wall, and the gate opened again, not because of the crystal, but because of her memory now whole, and her purpose clear. She turned to John and said, there is another child like Cale taken not far from here. If we leave now, they will erase him next. John looked at her and saw the same fire he once saw in Cale, the same light that did not break even when surrounded by darkness. He nodded and said, then we go together, and we save him. Too, as the gate pulled them and the world behind them screamed and the sky cracked open, pouring silver rain that burned the ground but could not touch them anymore. Chains were broken not by power or weapons, but by memory and love and the voice of a boy who never gave up, and now a new path had begun. Betrayer among us, the air inside the new camp was quiet, but not peaceful. The silence felt too heavy, like it was holding something inside, something dark and waiting to rise. The sky above was deep gray, not from clouds but from dust that refused to fall, the stars hidden behind fear and smoke. John stood near the fire, sharpening a metal rod, not because he needed to fight, but because it helped him think across the field. Max was resting with his eyes half open, always alert, always watching near the edge of the tent. Cale's mother sat alone, her eyes on the horizon, her thoughts drifting far beyond the sky. They had rescued another child from the prison, a girl with silver hair and golden eyes. Her name was Nira, and she said very little, only speaking when the silence became too loud. She had strange marks on her arms, like they were drawn by stars, her voice calm but cold, her gaze deep like a well with no bottom at. First they trusted her because Cale had spoken of others like him, taken from his world, lost in the void. But something in John's heart felt wrong, not loud, not clear, but soft and sharp, like a whisper you try to ignore. The fire crackled, and Nira stood slowly, her face lit by orange light. She walked to John and said, we are not safe here. They have already seen the gate open. They are tracing the memory signature, and soon they will find this place. John looked at her and said, how do you know that? And she replied, I saw it in a dream, but it was not my dream, it was theirs. Cale's mother turned her head and narrowed her eyes, her voice firm and clear. Whose dream do you speak of, and how does it come to you? Nira did not answer right away. Instead she stepped back, her hands behind her back, her fingers twitching slightly like they were remembering a motion they once knew too well. John stood and faced her slowly, something inside him growing colder, something deep in her silence was too perfect, too planned, too safe. She looked at him and said softly, not all of us escaped, some of us were changed, broken, bent into new shapes. Some of us were not meant to run, but to follow. Cale's mother stood, now her voice sharp like ice. What are you saying, and who do you follow? Nira smiled a slow and sad smile and said, I don't follow, I remember, and I obey. Before anyone could move, the crystal Cale left with John began to flicker in his pocket. The light inside turned from blue to red. The maps twisted and burned like paper in wind. The signal had been explicit. Nira's eyes changed for a second. Not golden but black, full of stars, dying, her voice deeper, now like something speaking through her. She said, he was never supposed to survive. The map was meant to be captured, not carried. The gate was never meant to open again, and you have broken everything. Max barked and jumped between them, growling louder than before. John grabbed the rod. Nira raised her hand and a blast of energy threw him back across the field. He hit the ground hard, but held the crystal close. His fingers burned, but strong. Cale's mother rushed to Nira, her hands glowing with light she had never used before, her face fierce, her memory awake. She said, you are not a child. You are a shadow dressed in light. You speak with stolen voices, and you wear stolen namas. Nira screamed, and the sound cracked. The sky birds fell from the air, and the ground split open beneath her feet. Shadows rose from the cracks, long and cold and shaped like chains. They wrapped around her arms and legs and held her in place. John stood. Again, his face bleeding, his heart burning, he raised the crystal high and said, "If you are a gate, then I will close you. If you are a signal, then I will silence you." And the crystal responded by glowing brighter than ever, the red inside melting into white fire. The shadows screamed and pulled away. Nira fell to the ground, shaking her voice. Small again, her hands reaching for help, but no longer trusted, no longer hidden. John stepped forward and said, "Who are you really, and why did you leave?" Nira looked up with tears, not from pain, but from memory, and said, "I was real. Once I was a sister to Kale. I was taken first. I was the one who led them to us, and I became their voice, because I was too weak to fight them, too afraid to forget. I gave them the path, but I never forgot the faces I broke." Kale's mother closed her eyes, her hands trembling, her voice shaking but strong. "You are broken, but not gone. Your chain was choice, and now your choice is yours again." She placed her hand on Nira's head and whispered, "Kale forgave everyone before himself. He would forgive you too." Shadows vanished, the sky opened, and for a moment the stars returned, blinking slowly like they were watching again. John knelt beside her and said, "We can't trust you yet, but we will not leave you, because broken does not mean lost." Nira nodded, her face wet, her eyes gold again, her voice small but honest. "I will help. I will show you what they fear most, not their weapons, not their armies, but the truth hidden in the last gate, the one they buried behind time and far away beyond stars and ash." Something heard her, something that had been waiting for her voice, and now it began to wake. One chance to save them all. The final night came without warning. The stars above were no longer steady. They spun slowly in wide circles, as if the sky itself was moving with purpose. The earth below whispered with a sound like breath held too long and ready to be released. John stood at the edge of the cliff, looking down at the valley where the last gate rested, hidden beneath layers of ancient rock machines and memory. He held the crystal in his hand, its light now steady, no longer flickering. No longer afraid. Beside him, Kale's mother stood silent, her eyes glowing soft and silver, her memories whole, her strength returned. She wore a cloak made from light and shadow, a gift from the gate before it closed, a symbol of the burden she now carried with grace. Nira stood behind them, her hands bound by light, not to punish, but to protect, her voice quiet, her mind heavy with regret, but her steps firm. She had given them a path through the last firewall, the one hidden in code and blood, and only she could walk it. Max stood between them, still watching the wind, listening to the air. He knew something was coming, something old and full of fire and ice, something not born but built by fear and silence. They moved together through the final path, a road made of glass and ash, every step cracking memories trapped below the surface. The walls around them shimmered with broken faces, lost names, pieces of the past pulled from every mind that had touched the gate before. At the center of the valley stood the last tower, tall and thin, like a needle stabbed into the earth, its walls breathing slowly as if alive, waiting for the key, waiting for the choice. John raised the crystal, and it pulsed once, and the tower opened, not with sound, but with silence so deep it crushed thought and made time slow. Inside the tower was a single chair floating in the air, above a pool of light and memory. Kale's voice echoed inside their minds, not as sound but as feeling. "This is the choice. The map leads here, because this is where the future begins or ends. This is where the last voice can rewrite the story, or let it burn." John looked at the chair, then at Nira, then at Kale's mother. He said, "One of us must sit and give the memory, not just the map, but the pain, the love, the sacrifice, the truth, because truth is the only thing that can close the gate forever." Nira stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "I was the betrayer. I should be the one to finish this." But Kale's mother placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You were not chosen to end it. You were chosen to survive it, to remember it, so others never forget." John looked down at the crystal still glowing in his hand. Then he looked up at the chair, and something inside him said, "This is what Kale wanted, not revenge, not escape, but a future built on choice and courage." Stepped toward the chair, the ground below him glowing with each step. The chair lowered to meet him. its light wrapping around him not like chains, but like memory welcoming him like an old friend. As he sat, the tower shook, the sky outside turned deep red, the stars blinked faster. The enemy had found them, the ones who built the chains, the ones who feared truth, were coming not in ships but in thought and sound. They came as whispers in the air, and fire in the wind. Kale's mother stood tall, raised her hands and summoned the last defense, a wall of memory made from every moment she had kept safe. Her son, her people, her pain, it rose around the tower like a storm of light. Nira closed her eyes and began to sing softly in a language older than sound, her voice reaching into the cracks of the gate, soothing the fear that had lived there too long. John felt the chair sink into his mind, showing him Kale's face over and over, his voice, his sacrifice, his choice. He saw the children who were taken, the lives twisted by fear and silence, the hope buried in dust and shadow. He whispered into the chair, "I give you everything I remember, and I ask you to give them something better. Give them peace, give them freedom, give them future." Tower exploded with light, not fire, not destruction, but release. The gate above cracked and folded into itself. The path that once led the enemy now erased with light across the sky. Stars returned one by one, blinking like new eyes waking from a long sleep. The silence broke not with screams, but with breath, with laughter, with hope. John stood from the chair, the crystal now dark, its light spent, its duty done. Kale's mother stepped forward and took his hand, her eyes full of tears that fell like stars. Nira knelt beside Max and whispered thank you, not just to him, but to the sky, the earth, and the boy who was never forgotten. The tower faded behind them, its mission complete, its story written, not in stone, but in heart. The last gate had closed, and nothing dark followed. As they walked away together, the sky opened above them, wide and warm and full of light, and somewhere far beyond it, Kale's voice whispered soft and proud, "You saved them all."